When I left Miami, I had no idea my life was about to veer in such an unexpected direction. I thought I had it all figured out, enduring hardships and painstakingly building a thriving business through sheer determination. My path had been paved with heartache and betrayal, but meeting Sophia felt like discovering something genuine, a rare sense of stability amidst the turbulence. 6 years into our marriage, however, subtle fractures began to appear, quiet frustrations left unspoken, prolonged silences that lingered too long. I told myself this was normal, but the growing distance between us gnawed at me. Deep down, I sensed something wasn't right. One afternoon, I called out to Sophia from the bathroom, and when I stepped into the kitchen, there she was, wrapped up in the arms of a stranger, his hands on her, kissing her as if I were invisible. "What the hell is this?" I yelled. The man hardly flinched, flashing a smug grin, while Sophia, cool as ever, asked me to grab him a beer. Stunned, I complied, but with a twist. I opened a Sam Adams, poured it out onto the floor, and stared him down. That's when I made it crystal clear. He wasn't welcome in my house. As he let out a pained yell, I hauled him out by his hair and turned back for Sophia. I shoved her and her purse outside, coldly suggesting she take her lover to the hospital. Before they could leave, I leaned in close to the man and warned him against calling the cops, or I'd finish what I started. Then I pushed him toward Sophia, who stood there stunned into rare silence. Inside, I collapsed onto a chair, trembling, not just from what Sophia had done, but from my own reaction. Violence isn't my default, but I've always had a quick temper, a relic of my younger years filled with rage and brutal outbursts. I just turned 40, Sophia was 39, and we'd been married almost 6 years. In all that time, I never shared the truth about my past in Miami, about my rough upbringing in Little Cuba. At 12, I watched my father lose his life in a bar fight, stabbed by a Cuban man who thought my dad was hitting on his girlfriend. The reality? She had only asked for a cigarette. My dad fought back valiantly until the knife found him from behind. After that, it was just me and my mom. My father's death hit her hard. Already struggling, she turned to work at a strip club to support us. The money was decent until one night, a customer attacked her. While the bouncer intervened, the man waited for her after work, ambushing her in an alley. She died there, alone, her body discovered only the next morning. Social services stepped in, and they found my uncle, Liam Carver, a man I hadn't even known existed. He owned a bar not far from where my dad had been killed and agreed to take me in. But we were never close. When I asked why my mom had never mentioned him, his answer was cryptic. Some things are better left buried. Fights became a regular part of my life, and I lost most of them until Liam finally took pity on me. "JC," he said one day, "life's a battle. You've got to learn to survive with these." He held up his fists. "Knives get lost, bullets run out, but your fists are always with you. I'll teach you to fight. The rest is on you." He trained me well, and as the neighborhood became crowded with Cuban refugees, many of them former inmates of Castro's prisons, I learned to hold my ground. By 19, I was a hardened fighter, known for my toughness in underground circles. My teenage years were spent mostly in juvie until a cop decided to intervene. At 22, after another arrest for fighting, Deputy Tom Bennett sat me down in a cold interrogation room. "Ethan Cole," he began. "That's your full name, right?" I nodded. "People call me Zane." He smirked. "Zane, huh? Funny. Doesn't look like you've got any friends." I shrugged, keeping quiet. "Listen, Zane," he continued. "You're charged with assault with a deadly weapon. Your fists and mayhem. You even bit off a guy's ear. Lucky we found it." He paused, letting that sink in. "Don't even start with the self-defense story. You're an adult now. No more juvie. From here on out, it's the real deal, adult lockup." "So, what's your point?" I finally asked. He studied me before leaning forward. "Marines." I laughed. "You're joking, right?" "No chance." "Think about it," he said. "You're tough, resourceful, and you know how to fight. The Corps could use someone like you. Otherwise, we both know where you're heading." "Where's that?" Dead. Look, I know about your parents, your uncle. You've had a rough run, but it doesn't have to end here. Mull it over in lockup. I did think about it. 3 attempts on my life in county jail, courtesy of the Cubans, made up my mind. The guy whose ear I'd bitten off was one of theirs. Soon enough, I found myself crawling through mud and razor wire at Parris Island, South Carolina, with explosions and gunfire all around me. All I could think was, what the hell have I gotten myself into? By the time I joined the Marines, Vietnam was long over. I didn't see any major combat, but I found no shortage of fights. Stationed in Germany, some buddies and I went bar hopping in West Berlin, which ended in an all-out brawl. A local guy, 6 feet 5 inches and built like a truck, and his crew didn't take kindly to us, spouting off about Cuba and communism. Fists flew, and by the time the MPs and German police arrived, the big guy and his friends were out cold. Back on base, I was slapped with charges for fighting and causing a disturbance. After a few days in the brig, my commanding officer pulled me aside. "Would you consider fighting in a ring instead?" "Hell yes, sir," I said without hesitation. For the next few years, I made a name for myself, winning most of my matches. But everything changed during a fight in the Philippines. My opponent suffered a critical injury, and watching him lie there, eyes open but lifeless, was a wake-up call. It hit me hard, and I vowed never to fight again. Though my unit was disappointed, I stuck to my decision. 2 months later, I left the service for good. Returning to the U.S., I decided to dive into academics, focusing on computers and technology. I had picked up a solid foundation in the Corps but wanted to deepen my knowledge. After 5 years of hard work, I graduated with honors, earning a master's degree in computer science. Shortly afterward, I landed a position at a thriving tech firm in San Jose, the burgeoning heart of Silicon Valley. My career took off quickly, but working under someone else didn't satisfy me. Along with 2 like-minded colleagues, we founded CB's Tech Research Incorporated. The company flourished, riding the wave of the Internet's explosive growth. Our innovations in hardware positioned us as industry leaders, bringing us incredible wealth. In my early 30s, I took a trip back to Miami to find the deputy sheriff who had changed the course of my life. It broke my heart to discover he'd been killed in the line of duty. I met his widow, Mia, and their 3 children. Grace, their eldest, was a nurse in her late 20s, while their 2 sons were still in school. Quietly, I set up college trust funds for the boys and provided financial assistance for Mia, ensuring it was all anonymous. Every Christmas, a card would arrive with family photos and updates. A small but cherished connection to a man I owed everything to. That was 7 years ago. Now, at 40, I was facing the unraveling of my 6-year marriage. I poured myself a gin and tonic, stepping out to the backyard to sit on the bench near the koi pond. The gentle sound of water cascading over the stones, framed by lilies and blooming flowers, offered a rare sense of peace. It was my sanctuary, the place where I could lose myself in thought. I reflected on Sophia and tried to pinpoint where things had gone wrong. She'd never seemed unhappy. Maybe she found me too reserved or distant, but she never voiced any complaints. We had first met at a tech expo in Anaheim. I'd been staying at the Marriott adjacent to the convention center with my business partner, Lucas Granger, co-founder of PacTech. While Lucas ranted about government regulations, my attention wandered to a striking brunette standing at a booth, surrounded by brochures. "Excuse me, Lucas," I muttered, weaving my way through the crowd toward her. Picking up a brochure on fiber optics, I feigned interest until a confident voice interrupted. "Interested in cutting-edge fiber optic installation?" Looking up into her piercing blue eyes, I responded with a grin. "Only if we can talk about it over dinner." Her name tag read Sophia, but her expression turned cold. "Not interested. If you're not serious, please move on." She walked off, leaving a younger, tech-savvy colleague to approach me. "Can I help you with something?" he asked. Feigning seriousness, I replied, "I'd like to discuss fiber optics and installation options for my company." "Which company?" "CB's Tech Research in San Jose," I said, watching his jaw drop. "You're Ethan Cole?" he stammered. I'll grab Sophia. After a brief and clearly heated discussion behind the booth curtain, Sophia returned, visibly annoyed. Apologies for earlier, Mr. Cole, she said stiffly. Let me walk you through our offerings. Call me Zane, I replied, gesturing to a nearby table. As she launched into a detailed presentation, I struggled to focus on the technical details, far more captivated by her passion and presence. A few minutes later, Lucas appeared, oblivious to the dynamic. Thanks for ditching me, Zane, he said, turning to Sophia.
I'm Lucas Granger.
Sorry you had to meet this guy. Then, without thinking, Lucas added, We already have fiber optics. Sophia froze, her eyes narrowing at me. You've been pretending? What kind of a jerk are you? Lucas excused himself, sensing the tension, leaving me to face the fallout. I'm sorry, I said quickly. I just wanted a chance to meet you. How about dinner? My treat. Her glare softened into a small smile. Fine. Where and when? Cheesecake Factory, 7 o'clock. Later that evening, I dressed casually. Levi's, a black t-shirt, a tan corduroy Lucasette, and white Reeboks, and waited at the restaurant. 25 minutes passed before Sophia arrived with 5 others, including the techie colleague from the expo. Realizing I'd been outmaneuvered, I plastered on a polite smile as the young man greeted me. Mr. Cole, meet our team. I nodded, biting back irritation. Call me Zane. Nice to meet all of you. To my surprise, the dinner went better than expected. David, the techie guy, turned out to be a natural comedian, keeping the group laughing. After they left, Sophia lingered. Thanks for being a gracious host, she said with a mischievous grin. I knew you meant just me, but I told the team it was an open invite. They were thrilled to meet you. Forgive me? I laughed, shaking my head. Not sure I'll ever forgive you. She seemed taken aback, then realized I was joking. We ended the night at downtown Disney, sipping drinks at the House of Blues before I hailed a cab to take her back to her hotel. So, where are you staying? I asked. A motel by the convention center, she replied, then hesitated. But I wouldn't mind seeing the Anaheim Marriott. She leaned in for a soft kiss. That's for being a good sport. Care to invite me up to your room? There's no one else I'd rather spend the evening with, I said, helping her into the cab. A year later, we were married. Lucas and our friend Adam Rivers served as my best men, with David from the expo standing as a groomsman. I was convinced we were madly in love. 6 years later, sitting by the koi pond with my 4th gin and tonic, I stared up at the night sky. The phone had rung at least a dozen times, but I didn't need to check to know who it was. The question was, did she have the nerve to come home? At 4 a.m., I finally climbed into bed, lying awake for an hour before drifting off. Morning brought no relief. The empty space beside me was a painful reminder of the chaos. Dragging myself out of bed, I resolved to take action. First stop, the bank. I adjusted our accounts, leaving some money in the joint checking for Sophia but closing the savings and canceling her card. She had her own account and a solid job as an executive at What Sophia Sun Insurance, so I knew she'd manage. Her Lexus was co-signed, but I didn't care. My Jeep and Harley were all I needed. The house, though, was a bigger issue. With the economy in shambles, selling would be tough. One of us would likely have to buy out the other. At the office, I immediately called my attorney, Henry Quinn, and laid everything out for him. He listened in disbelief. Zane, there's got to be a reason she did this, he said finally. I have no idea, Henry. Everything seemed fine until yesterday. I admitted, frustration evident in my voice. We need to figure out who this guy is. Do you have his license plate number? I nodded and handed it over. Get the paperwork started. I don't even know if I can face her right now. Zane, you have to talk to her. Find out why she did it, Henry urged. I don't know, I said, shaking my head. She acted like I wouldn't do anything, like I was too blind or too weak to stop her, like I'm some kind of fool. Henry's expression grew serious. Does Sophia know about your past? No, I admitted, staring out the window. I never told her about my childhood or the violence. I wanted to leave all of that behind, especially after what happened with that man. Henry nodded knowingly. Understood. I'll get started. Do you want her restricted from the house? A restraining order. She can still access the house, I said after a moment. I'll be gone for a while. No restraining order, at least not yet. Henry raised an eyebrow. Where are you going? I'm not sure. Maybe the San Juan Islands or northern Idaho. I'll let you know. When do you want her served? Once everything's ready, I replied firmly. Henry gave me a long look. Take care of yourself, Zane. You look like hell. I let out a dry laugh before heading back to CB's Tech in San Jose. As I entered the lobby, Jamie, our receptionist, called out to me. Ethan, there's someone waiting for you in the conference room, she said with a smile. Who is it, Jamie? Why couldn't Lucas or Adam handle it? I asked, already feeling worn down. It's not a him, Jamie teased. It's a her. She asked for you specifically, and she's stunning. I rolled my eyes. Jamie, seriously, what's her name? Grace Mateo, from Miami. The name stopped me cold.
Grace Mateo?
Here. Jamie nodded. Yep, she's waiting for you. I took a moment to steady myself before heading to the conference room. When I opened the door, there she was. Grace Mateo, more striking than I remembered. Mr. Cole, she greeted me with a soft smile. Grace, wow, I said, immediately regretting how awkward I sounded. You've, grown up a lot since I last saw you. She laughed, light and warm. It's been 6 or 7 years. I was in my 20s and now I'm in my 30s. Fully grown. Sorry, I said, recovering. It's just a surprise to see you. How's Mia? And your brothers? She gestured toward the hallway. Actually, can we move to your office? It might be more comfortable. Of course, I said, leading the way. As we passed my secretary, Diana, she shot me a curious, knowing glance. Nice office, Grace said, taking in the space. Thank Diana for that, I replied. She's got an eye for decor. Diana. That's an unusual name, Grace remarked. She's part Sioux, I think. Very protective, I added with a grin. Grace chuckled. Yeah, I noticed. She watches you like a hawk. That's her, I said, gesturing to a chair. Can I get you something to drink? Iced tea, if you have it. Green tea okay? Perfect, she said. Once we were seated, Grace didn't waste any time. Zane, you're probably wondering why I'm here. I am, I admitted. But first, how's your mom? Her smile faded, replaced by a somber expression. Zane, she's dying. She asked for you. The words hit me like a freight train. Grace, why didn't you call? I would have come to Miami immediately. She insisted I come to you in person, Grace explained. I think she just wanted me out of the house for a bit. It's pancreatic cancer. I'm so sorry, I said, stunned. Is there anything I can do? Financial support. She's covered and receiving the best care. Thanks to you. Your monthly checks have been a godsend. Oh, and the boys? Nathaniel graduated from MIT and Oliver from Georgia Tech. Both with honors. I felt a wave of guilt. I should have visited. I've been so wrapped up in my own life. Stop, Grace interrupted gently. Mom said you'd feel like this. Zane, you've already done more for us than we could ever repay. You started a business, got married. Your hands have been full. She paused. Mom would love to see you. Can you come? I'll have the company jet ready tomorrow, I said without hesitation. Do you have a place to stay tonight? I haven't had time to find one, she admitted. Perfect. You can stay at my apartment. She hesitated. Won't your wife mind? I looked away. Sophia and I are separated, probably heading toward divorce. I'm sorry, Zane, she said softly. I hope I'm not adding to your stress. Not at all. It's good to see you. Are you hungry? I could eat, she said with a smile. Great. There's a little place nearby with the best pizza and Italian food this side of the Rockies, I said, standing. She nodded. Can we stop by your apartment first? I'd like to drop off my bags and freshen up. No problem, I said, leading her out. On the way to the parking garage, we grabbed her suitcase from security. As I opened the passenger door of my Ford F-150 Super Crew, she paused, raising an eyebrow. I didn't expect you to drive a truck, she admitted. I figured something a little flashier. I laughed, buckling in. Not really my style, but if you want, I can rent something fancy. She blushed. No, the truck's great. I didn't mean anything by it. Good, I said with a grin, starting the engine. Let's go. The next morning, after an evening of reminiscing and a restless night, Grace and I were soaring over Phoenix, Arizona, aboard the company's Gulfstream G350. Sitting in the co-pilot seat, she stared at the controls in awe, her eyes wide. Zane, I didn't know you could fly. There's a lot you don't know about me, I replied with a smile, adjusting the altitude. Her tone grew curious. What happened with you and Sophia, if you don't mind me asking? Not anymore, I sighed. Somehow, she thought I'd just sit back and accept it. Her betrayed husband. While she ran around with other men. Grace gasped, her eyes wide with disbelief. That's insane. Why would she ever think you'd tolerate that? I shook my head, my frustration palpable. That's the million-dollar question, Grace. I don't know. We've grown apart, sure, but it's not like she ever brought it up. Honestly, I can't even remember the last time we were intimate. I guess I was so caught up in work that I didn't notice things slipping away, and she never said a word. I paused, searching my memory for any clue, any warning signs, but came up empty. To me, it felt like Sophia had made a sudden decision, that I no longer Henried, and chose to end our marriage with betrayal. But why? I glanced over at Grace, who was looking thoughtfully out the window. Wanting to shift the focus, I asked, "What about you and the family? How are things on your end?" She turned back to me, her expression softening. "Not much to tell," she began. "After we lost Dad, things were tough for Mom. His pension helped, but it wasn't enough. I went to nursing school, and the boys pitched in with part-time jobs, as long as it didn't interfere with their studies." Her voice grew quieter as she continued. "Ethan, you were a godsend. Before you showed up, I didn't even know you existed. Mom told me how Dad had helped you join the Marines, but it was just a story to me until you came to the house. She was overwhelmed, you know? She already knew about your past and everything Dad had done for you. He always kept her updated, your accomplishments in the Corps, your boxing matches, even the articles about CB's tech research." She hesitated, then added, "Dad was so proud of you, Jazz. Mom showed me the scrapbook he kept. Clippings, photos, everything. He was planning to visit you to ask if you'd come meet the family. He wanted to introduce you to us properly. But," her voice wavered, "he was killed the following week." Hearing Grace recount the memory of Deputy Tom Bennett's death was like a punch to the gut. I stayed silent, the hum of the plane's turbines filling the space. After a while, I asked quietly, "I noticed you're not wearing a ring. You're not married." Grace gave a wistful smile.
No.
"I never really had the time. Between nursing school, working at the hospital, and helping Mom and the boys, there wasn't room for anything else. I wanted to ask if there had been anyone special, but I decided against it, for now." A few hours later, we touched down at Miami International Airport. The tarmac shimmered in the heat as our Gulfstream G350 taxied to a private ramp. A limo was waiting for us, and soon, our luggage was loaded, and we were on our way to Grace's family home. Miami hadn't changed much since I'd last been there. The skyline had more high-rises blocking the beach, but the heat and humidity were just as I remembered. Grace's mom lived in a modest single-story ranch on the southern edge of the city. As we pulled up, I couldn't help but notice how well-kept everything was. The lawn was immaculate, the white picket fence freshly painted, and the house itself showed no signs of Florida's notorious weather wear. Even the roof looked brand new. Noticing my expression, Grace said softly, "Your monthly contributions were more than enough to keep things in shape." I nodded, quietly grateful that I could help. Grace went inside to greet her mom while I handled the luggage and paid the driver. "Stay on call, Carlos," I told him, handing over a generous tip. When he mentioned having other clients, I reassured him, "You'll be well compensated." Inside, I expected the house to feel heavy and somber, but instead, it was warm and inviting. Sunlight streamed through large windows, and the decor was simple yet tasteful. The air conditioning was perfectly tuned, offering a welcome escape from the Miami heat. "Ethan Cole, well, it's about time," a familiar voice called from the living room. I turned and saw Mia Mateo sitting in a recliner, an Afghan draped over her legs. "Hello, Mia," I said, walking over. "It's been too long," she said with mock sternness. "I'm sorry I haven't visited sooner," I began. "Enough of that," she interrupted with a wave of her hand. "You're here now, and that's what Henriers."
Come closer.
I knelt beside her, taking her frail hand in mine. Mia smiled warmly, though her eyes betrayed the pain she was enduring. Despite her illness, she radiated an inner strength that left me in awe. "You've still got that incredible view," I said, nodding toward the picture window overlooking the beach and mangroves. Mia's face lit up. "Yes, Daniel loved it here. I thought I might lose the house after he passed, but I had 4 good reasons to keep it." She gave me a playful wink. "By the way, did you pay off the mortgage 5 years ago?" I smiled sheepishly, guilty as charged. I wanted to help, but I asked the bank not to mention it. Mia shook her head gently. "Ethan, you didn't have to do all of this. You didn't even know us back then, and Tom was already gone. But it means the world to me. You've always been a part of this family." Tears welled up in my eyes, unbidden. I hadn't cried when Sophia betrayed me, but hearing Mia's words, knowing her time was limited, broke me. "Come here," Mia said, opening her arms. I leaned into her embrace, and for the first time in years, I let myself cry. Her fingers ran through my hair as she whispered, "It's okay, let it out." After what felt like an eternity, I sat back, wiping my eyes. Mia gave me a gentle smile. "Feel better?" I nodded, the weight of the past days, Sophia, my past, Mia's illness, finally catching up to me. "Mia, I'll find the best doctors for you, the best hospitals," I promised. She shook her head softly.
No, Ethan.
"I've made peace with God. There's nothing more they can do. The cancer has spread too far. I'm just grateful to spend a little more time with my family, and I'm glad I got to see you." Looking at her, I couldn't understand why someone so good had to suffer so much. It wasn't fair. Despite her frailty, she still looked beautiful, and I couldn't help but notice how much Grace resembled her. Fair skin, emerald green eyes, and that rich crimson hair. "Ethan, are you staying for a few days?" Mia asked, her voice soft and weary. I noticed the exhaustion etched on her face. It could have been from the cancer, or maybe just the weight of everything. "Mia, I'm not going anywhere," I replied firmly. "You're stuck with me." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, though her expression was one of relief. "Now get some rest," I said gently. She smiled and nodded, tilting her head back to gaze out the window. Within moments, her eyes fluttered shut, and her breathing became slow and steady. I stood there for a while, watching her sleep, feeling an overwhelming mix of gratitude and sorrow. This woman had become the mother I needed but never had. "Is she asleep?" a soft voice asked from behind me. I turned to find Grace standing in the doorway, her eyes fixed on her mother. "Yeah, she's resting," I replied. Grace stepped closer, her gaze never leaving Mia. "Thank you, Ethan. Thank you for being here," she said quietly. Without warning, she wrapped her arms around me, trembling as soft sobs escaped her. I held her close, my heart breaking for this strong but grieving woman. "I'm glad you called me," I said softly. She pulled back slightly, brushing away her tears with a quick motion. "Are you staying here?" she asked, her voice still shaky. "I think I am," I answered. "Then let me show you to your room," she said, her tone lightening a little. She led me down the hallway, stopping at the last door on the left. This was Nathaniel's room. He's living in New York now, working for the Samuel Ross Research Foundation as Dr. Victor Matthews' assistant on some quantum physics project. Don't ask me to explain it. I'm just a humble surgical nurse, she added with a small smile, though I could tell she was proud of her brother's success. Both Nathaniel and Oliver have a lot of respect for you, Jazz. They were sorry they couldn't be here to greet you, but they'll be visiting in a few days. Nathaniel specifically asked me to make sure you feel at home. The room was remarkably tidy, with walls adorned by paintings and sketches of stars and galaxies. A shelf along the far wall showcased an impressive collection of rocket and spacecraft models from different eras. There was a German V-2 rocket, a Mercury capsule perched on a Redstone rocket, a Gemini capsule on a Titan rocket, the massive Saturn V with an Apollo spacecraft, and even the Challenger space shuttle. I smiled, gaining insight into Nathaniel's interests. This is perfect, I told Grace, glancing at her. Her expression turned serious. Jazz, how long are you planning to stay? I took her hand and said softly, as long as it takes. Before I could react, she hugged me tightly, tears falling freely. I held her for a moment, unsure of what to say or do. Then, she pulled back, looking up at me. Suddenly, she stood on her toes and kissed me. The moment was brief. Her eyes went wide as she jumped back, visibly shaken. Oh my God! I'm so sorry, she exclaimed, turning and bolting from the room. I stood there, stunned. Shaking my head, I tried to steady my thoughts. Don't even go there, I told myself. Grace was incredible. Smart, beautiful, compassionate, and with a warm scent that lingered in the air. But she was Mia's daughter, and I was still married. At least for now. I called Henry Hugh Brunn to check in. Henry, I'm in Miami, I told him. Here's the address where I'm staying. Zane, Sophia's been losing it, he said, his tone exasperated. She's been storming the office every day. Lucas and Adam have barred her from the property after the last incident. Security had to physically escort her out. I'll deal with her when I'm back, I said. She'll be served soon enough. For now, I'm focusing on a friend who's dying. Henry sighed. Understood. Just keep in touch. I'll update Lucas and Adam. Take care of yourself, Jazz. After hanging up, I tossed my phone on the nightstand. My mind drifted back to Sophia, her smug expression as she stood in the kitchen with her lover by her side. Screw her, I muttered under my breath. I unpacked, changed into something comfortable, and stretched out on the bed. It had been a long, draining day. Glancing at my watch, I saw it was 6 p.m. Just a quick nap, I thought. When I opened my eyes, a voice broke through my grogginess. Ethan, do you want something to eat? Yeah, sure, I mumbled. A soft giggle followed. Ethan, what would you like for breakfast? My eyes shot open. Grace stood in the doorway, dressed in pale green pajamas and a darker green robe. Breakfast? What time is it? I asked, still half asleep. It's 8:30 in the morning, she said, laughing. Time to get up. I've got scrambled eggs, bacon, and sourdough toast ready if you're hungry. I glanced down at myself and realized I was in just my white boxer shorts and a t-shirt. Grace noticed my look and blushed. I found a t-shirt in your things, she stammered. You seemed uncomfortable, so I helped you out of your clothes. Don't worry, I've done this plenty with patience. It's no big deal. Wow, I muttered, shaking my head. I must have been really out of it. She smiled. Breakfast is waiting. She pointed to the closet. There's a robe in Nathaniel's closet. It should fit. With that, she disappeared down the hall. When I joined her in the kitchen, she was busy setting the table. How's Mia? I asked. Grace sighed. She's still sleeping. She's been doing that more and more. I nodded and moved to help her, but she waved me off. Sit down, she said, grinning. I sat, pretending to be chastised. She laughed and set a plate in front of me. Scrambled eggs, crispy bacon, and sourdough toast. Where's yours? I asked. Don't worry, I'm not letting you eat alone, she said, sitting down beside me. She dug into her plate with an enthusiasm that made me chuckle. My God, you can eat, I teased. Grace blushed deeply. her cheeks tinged with pink as she hurried to swallow the mouthful of eggs. "Sorry," she mumbled. "I guess I was just really hungry." I glanced at her slim figure, wondering where all that food could possibly go. Just then, a loud voice shattered the quiet. "Hey, sis, where's the food?" The kitchen door swung open, and a young man with fiery red hair stepped inside, his expression a mix of mischief and curiosity. "Oliver, keep your voice down," Grace snapped, glaring at him. "Mom's sleeping, and where were you last night? You knew I was home with Mr. Jazz." "Geez, sorry, Liz," Oliver replied, grabbing a plate from the counter. "I had a very important engagement, if you know what I mean." He winked at me before piling food onto his plate and plopping into the chair across from me. He stuck out his hand. "It's great to have you here, Mr. Jazz. Just call me Jazz," I said, shaking his hand. "Jazz," he repeated through a mouthful of bacon. Glancing at Grace, he added, "How's Mom?" "She's been better," Grace said, her tone softening. But seeing Jazz really lifted her spirits. Oliver's brow furrowed for a moment. Then he grinned mischievously. "So, Grace, who, or what, was your important engagement last night?" Grace's eyes narrowed. "Her name's Cindy," he said before she could interrupt. "A real fine thing from the Pink Poodle. She invited me over to check out her sketches. She's got a great eye for lines and curves." Grace groaned in exasperation, rolling her eyes. "Oliver, you're such a pig." "Yeah, isn't it great?" he replied, laughing as he shoved another forkful of eggs into his mouth. "Oliver, I hear you graduated from Georgia Tech with honors and even earned a doctorate. What are you up to now?" I asked, steering the conversation in a more productive direction. Oliver shrugged, his playful demeanor fading. "Not much at the moment. I wanted to take some time off to be with Mom. After that, we'll see. If you're interested, I might have something for someone with your skills in California." California, he mused. "Maybe later. How long are you staying?" "As long as it takes," I said. Oliver nodded, a flicker of sadness passing through his eyes. "Thanks, Jazz. It means a lot to her. She's always thought of you as the son she didn't get to keep, so that makes you my bro. And, unfortunately, Grace is your sister." He yelped as Grace smacked him on the back of the head with a spatula. After breakfast, Grace and Oliver cleared the table while I wandered into the living room. Mia was still asleep in her recliner, an Afghan pulled up over her frail shoulders. I sat on the couch watching her, thoughts swirling. This family had already endured so much, losing their father and now facing Mia's illness. "It's not fair," I thought bitterly. Why couldn't I do more for them? For her? I didn't realize I was crying until a gentle hand touched my shoulder. "Come with me," Grace said softly. She took my hand, leading me outside to the veranda. From there, we walked to a small hill surrounded by overhanging palm fronds. She stopped beneath a sturdy tree, turned to me, and kissed me. Her lips were firm but tender against mine. When she pulled back, she wiped the tears from my cheeks. "I've wanted to do that ever since I saw you walk into that conference room," Grace admitted, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry, Jazz, but your wife is a fool. I'm sorry if I overstepped." Before she could say more, I pulled her close and kissed her back. Grace melted in my arms, her lips meeting mine with an intensity that made it impossible to resist. Her touch, her scent. It was overwhelming. When I finally pulled away, I looked into her tear-filled eyes. "Grace, maybe this isn't the right time," I said, my voice low and thick with emotion. "We're both dealing with so much. Your mom, my wife. I don't want to hurt you, but I think I'm falling in love with you." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Ethan, I fell for you 7 years ago when you first visited my mom. I never stopped thinking about you. It broke my heart when I heard you were married, but I never forgot you. That's why I came to you, to tell you about Mom. I had to see you again." She hesitated, her voice trembling. "Please forgive me." "My God, Grace, there's nothing to forgive," I said. "I just wish I had met you before Sophia, but I need to understand what happened with her. I need to know why she turned to someone else. I need answers." Grace nodded. I understand. Just remember, whatever happens, I'll always be here. She kissed me again, this time softly, her lips lingering on mine for a moment before she pulled away. I held her close, burying my face in her hair, inhaling the comforting scent of lilacs. What was wrong with me? I wondered bitterly. Here I am, holding an extraordinary woman, yet I feel tied to Sophia until I can figure out what went wrong. We walked back into the house, finding Mia awake and watching us with a faint smile. My lord, you two look like you belong together, she said softly. I started to reply, but she added, I'm sorry, Ethan. I know you're married. I shouldn't have said that. Grace and I both laughed. I reassured Mia, it's okay. You and Grace will always have a place in my heart. Over the next 2 weeks, Grace and I were careful around each other. The tension didn't escape Oliver, who often gave Grace knowing looks. One day, I overheard a conversation in the kitchen as I passed through the hallway. I'd be proud to have Ethan as my brother-in-law, Oliver said. Me too, Nathaniel chimed in. He had arrived a week earlier. Grace's voice was firm. Guys, he's married. I won't be the other woman. Got it. I couldn't hear their reply, but footsteps approached, and I pretended I was just heading down the hall. Hey, Ethan, Oliver called out. Feel your ears burning? We were just talking about you. Too bad you're already taken. Bro Grace is practically drooling over you. Grace shrieked, chasing Oliver down the beach with a spatula, while Nathaniel and I doubled over with laughter. From the living room, Mia's soft chuckle made us freeze. Then, suddenly, a violent coughing fit erupted. I rushed to her side, cradling her in my arms. Nathaniel, call emergency, I shouted. At the hospital, a doctor led us into a small conference room. Grace, I'm afraid your mother doesn't have much time left, Dr. Clara said softly, his tone both compassionate and grave. I don't believe she'll make it through the night. What would you like to do? Grace's voice, steady but laced with sorrow, carried the weight of her decision. We want her home. I know she'd want to spend her last moments there. Dr. Clara nodded. I understand. I'll make the necessary arrangements. By afternoon, Mia was back in her familiar recliner, the setting sun casting a golden glow across her peaceful face. Though she was unable to speak, her presence filled the room. Grace, Nathaniel, and Oliver stood by her side, and Grace held her hand tightly, as if willing her mother to stay just a moment longer. Suddenly, Mia stirred, her frail hand tugging gently at Grace's arm. She motioned her daughter closer, her lips moving in a whisper. Grace bent down, listening intently. When she straightened, her eyes brimmed with emotion as she looked at me. Ethan, she said softly, she's asking for you. I knelt beside Mia, my heart heavy as I leaned in to hear her faint voice. Her eyes, though barely open, gleamed with clarity. With great effort, she raised a trembling hand to beckon me closer. Ethan, she whispered, her voice raspy but filled with conviction. You've always held a special place in our hearts. Take care of her. I know you love her, and she loves you. I'll always be there for you. Always. Her hand slipped from mine, coming to rest by her side. A single tear escaped her eye as she closed them for the last time. I gently touched her cheek, my voice breaking as I whispered, and I will always love you, Mia, always. As I rose, Grace's arms wrapped around me. I turned into her embrace, letting the sobs I'd been holding in escape. The grief was unbearable. I should have been here more, I choked out. I should have taken better care of all of you, of her. I shouldn't have stayed away for so long. Grace held me tightly, her voice soothing. You were always here in spirit, Ethan. If it weren't for you, things would have been so much harder. Don't ever doubt that. Nearby, Nathaniel and Oliver gathered around their mother, their faces etched with loss. When I regained my composure, I gently pulled the Afghan Mia loved over her face, a quiet farewell. Oliver placed a reassuring arm around Nathaniel's shoulders, offering silent strength. Grace left the room to contact the coroner and the mortuary. I stepped onto the veranda, my legs weak, and leaned against the railing as the sun dipped below the horizon. The weight of helplessness bore down on me. For all my success, I had never felt more powerless. Grace joined me, her presence comforting. She rested a hand on my arm as the last ray of sunlight disappeared, and then it happened. A brilliant flash of green lit up the horizon. Grace gasped softly. "Mom was right," she whispered in awe, gripping my arm. "I love you." The green flash lingered in my mind as I prepared to leave Miami a week later. Before boarding my flight, I called Henry Hugh Brunn. "Zane," Henry began, his voice tinged with urgency. "Things are tense here. Your wife is spiraling over your absence. She's convinced you're with someone else. Apparently, someone at the company told her you left in the corporate jet with a young woman. Let her think what she wants," I replied, my voice steady. "She can investigate all she likes. There's nothing to find." "Has she been served yet?" "Yes," Henry said. "Sophia was served at work. From what I hear, it hit her hard. They had to take her to a back office. I don't think she saw it coming." "Has your PI found anything?" I asked. "They have," he confirmed. "Turns out Sophia's been having an affair with Dr. Michael Douglas, a VP at Dalton Communications. And get this, the Mercedes parked at your house belongs to his wife, Catherine Douglas. It seems Sophia and Victor have been involved for months, maybe longer. She's been telling people you have an open marriage. That true?" "Come on, Henry. You know me better than that." "Yeah, I figured," Henry said with a sigh. "But here's the kicker. She's countersuing for infidelity." "What?" I snapped. "On what grounds?" She named 2 women in the counterclaim, Mia Mateo and Elaine Riley. "Remember them?" I groaned. "Damn, I thought she knew. How did she even find out?" "Hard to say," Henry replied. "Maybe that's why she's so unhinged. But it doesn't excuse her actions. You have the documentation to prove those relationships were strictly professional. Mia just passed, though."
I'm sorry, Ethan.
"I know how much she meant to you. How are you holding up?" "I'm managing," I said, my voice heavy with emotion. "But I want the monthly checks to Mia's family to continue. Set up a trust for Grace, Nathaniel, and Oliver. They don't need it now, but their kids might someday." "Understood," Henry said. "I'll handle it. And the countersuit. Send her lawyer the full records on Mia and Elaine. That should settle that nonsense." "I'll get on it," Henry assured me. "One last thing. Was Victor Reed named in the divorce?" "No," I said. "Given what happened, we decided to leave it out." "Probably for the best," Henry agreed. "Still, you did get some justice, didn't you?" The memory was vivid. "You could say that." Henry chuckled. "Victor still hasn't fully recovered." The next day, Grace accompanied me to the airport. Before I boarded, she hugged me tightly, her voice soft yet firm. "No matter what you decide, Ethan, I'll always be here for you." "I know," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "And no matter what happens, you've already captured my heart and soul. But I have to set things straight with Sophia. Somehow, she believes I had an affair with your mother." Grace gasped. "Oh no." "Yes," I said, my voice weary. "I need to clear that up, though I doubt it'll change anything. She's already shattered my trust beyond repair." "I understand," Grace whispered, her voice soft but resolute. "Please take care of yourself." I nodded, leaning in to kiss her deeply, as though imprinting the moment in my memory. As I turned toward the boarding gate, I glanced back for one last look, watching her until she disappeared from view. Weeks later, Sophia sat across from me at a long, polished table, her attorney beside her. Henry sat at my side, his presence a steady anchor in this storm. Once Sophia's legal team had reviewed the notarized documents regarding Mia and Elaine, her counterclaim unraveled. The baseless rumor that I'd left with a young woman was dismissed when the truth came out. I had flown to be with Mia, the woman who had been a mother to me in all but name, during her final days, accompanied by her daughter Grace. Still, the legal battle dragged on for nearly 2 months before Sophia and I finally met face to face for what would be our last conversation as husband and wife. She had insisted on speaking to me before finalizing the divorce. Ethan, I'm so sorry. Sophia began, her voice trembling. I truly believed you were having an affair with those two women. Someone came to me with evidence that you were supporting them financially. What was I supposed to think? I met her gaze, my voice cold and firm. You were supposed to trust me, Sophia. To love me enough to come to me and ask. That's what you were supposed to do. Not run to another man and flaunt it in front of me. Did you really think I'd just stand there and take it? And how's Reed, or should I say Johnson-less? Sophia flinched, a pained expression crossing her face. He's still undergoing surgeries, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. They were able to save most of his leg, but he lost a testicle. The glass shards caused a lot of damage. He wanted to press charges against you, but I convinced him to drop it. If everything came out, his wife would find out, and she's the one with all the money and power. She owns the company. I haven't seen him since that day. Let me guess, I said, bitterness lacing my words. You thought parading him around in front of me would teach me some kind of lesson? That I'd realize what I drove you to do? Sophia's eyes filled with something like regret as she shook her head. I didn't expect your reaction, she admitted quietly. A humorless laugh escaped me. No? Did I ruin your little plan? Elle? Sorry to disappoint you. You thought he'd be the answer to all your problems, didn't you? Henry and his PIs kept me informed. It wasn't much of a secret. Everyone at his office knew except his wife. Henry shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. I continued, my anger unabated. You chose to believe whatever lies Reed fed you instead of coming to me. And I know it was him, trying to dig up dirt on me to win you over. He didn't find anything, and neither did you. Instead, you jumped into his arms without a second thought. Sophia's lawyer cleared his throat, his face stern. Mr. Arthur, I must insist. Insist on what? I snapped, cutting him off. Screw you. I have every right to speak my mind. Sophia's gasp broke the tension. Ethan, please stop, she pleaded, tears beginning to spill. I slammed my hand on the table, leaning toward her. You never gave me a chance, Sophia. You wanted this to happen. You needed it to justify what you'd already decided to do. You fell for him and didn't want to risk being wrong about me. Silence fell over the room as I stood and moved to the window. I stared out at the courtyard, struggling to rein in the storm of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. After a long pause, I turned back, my voice softer but no less pained. Tell me the truth, Sophia. What did I do to push you away? Was I a bad husband? Did I not give you enough attention? Was I not enough for you? What was it? Tears streaked down her face as she whispered, I don't know, Ethan. Don't call me that, I said, my tone icy. Only those I love and care about call me Zane. You lost that privilege the moment you let another man touch you. Her eyes widened, her lips trembling as she tried to form a response. Instead, she bolted from the room, her attorney close behind. Henry exhaled heavily, breaking the tense silence. Well, he said, gathering the documents. I guess that's the end of this meeting. I'll handle the filing. Anything else, Jazz? I shook my head, my voice weary. No, I'm heading to the condo. Call me if you need anything. Back at my condo, I grabbed a beer and sat on the patio, watching planes take off and land. My thoughts drifted between Sophia, Mia, and Grace. Despite everything, a small part of me still cared for Sophia, but the love I once had for her was beyond repair. She had destroyed it with her betrayal. I pictured Grace standing by the ocean, her hair catching the breeze as the sun set behind her. She wasn't just Mia's daughter. She had become someone who mattered deeply to me. But would her father, Deputy Mateo, ever accept me? I doubted it. He'd always see me as the troubled street kid from years ago. Maybe I'm not meant to be happy, I muttered under my breath. Mia's voice echoed in my mind, firm and unwavering. Ethan, don't you dare think like that. You promised me you'd be there for Grace. I reached out instinctively, but her image vanished. Jolting awake, I realized I had drifted off on the patio. Clarity settled over me like a sunrise. I knew what I had to do. Meanwhile, Grace sat beneath a mangrove tree by the shore, her heart aching as she gazed at the water. She wondered if Ethan had chosen to reconcile with Sophia. The thought made her chest tighten. How could he go back to someone who hurt him so deeply? She whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks. A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. Here, use this. Grace looked up to see Ethan kneeling beside her, gently handing her a handkerchief. His eyes, filled with sincerity and warmth, met hers. I'm sorry it took me so long, he said, his voice low and steady. You're here. That's all that matters, Grace replied, her voice trembling. Ethan leaned in, brushing a soft kiss against her lips. And I'll always be with you, he promised. Together, they turned to watch the sunset as a brilliant flash of green illuminated the horizon, a radiant blessing from the universe. Grace looked up at the sky, imagining her parents smiling down at them, their love eternal.